Our group would first utilize the dual perspective in client assessment. So as you're interviewing and assessing the client, you're there to get to know them as an individual, which is the first sphere of the dual system of all individuals. So within getting to know that individual, we would build off of that utilizing strengths-based questioning to get to know the nurturing system as well as the sustaining system. Asking questions about their support network, and through that, learning about their family and their community. Asking questions about what they hope to achieve, what they hope to do, and other possibility-driven strengths-based questioning. And through that, we would get answers to the sustaining system. We would better be able to develop our ideas of their economic resources, their education systems, larger societal forces that are impacting them. And so once you have a better idea of this dual system, so you have an idea of the individual, you have an idea of the nurturing system, and you have an idea of the sustaining system, we take that knowledge and we apply that to client engagement. So really, you need to have an effective assessment and effective utilization of this dual perspective and assessment to properly engage with the client. If you don't have a good idea of the nurturing system or the sustaining system, you could offer solutions or ideas or even address the client in a way that's going to alienate you too.
So our group found the Stevenson multi-group acculturation scale, and it's a 32 instrument scale that evaluates immersion in both the culture of origin and the dominant culture in society. It's actually the first acculturation scale to be developed for use across ethnic groups, and this scale provides an index of degree of immersion in dominant and ethnic societies, which can influence how the clinician interprets research, the assessment data, and how the client presents. So we would use this scale in our assessment because it would help the clinician determine and understand what culture the client sees themselves relating to more, and how their culture influences how they interpret the world around them, and in turn can help the clinician relate to the client.
One recommendation our group has for agencies is to hire employees who are culturally aware and sensitive to the clients they're representing. For example, if the client base predominantly speaks another language, you would try to hire employees who are proficient in that language. And if that's not possible, you would try to contract with translation services to still be able to accommodate the client and be able to communicate with them. You would also want to hire employees or some employees who represent the demographic they're serving. For example, if you predominantly serve an African American community, you wouldn't want to hire a predominantly white staff. You would also want in your agency like posters on the wall to help represent the clients you're representing as well. Like if you're predominantly serving Vietnamese clients, you wouldn't want a bunch of white people on posters and such, and you would want materials on the wall that reflect the different languages and different religions if your agency allows religious material. Also, intake forms, you wouldn't want intake forms in only English. You would want to have it in other languages if your clients speak different languages predominantly. We would recommend having cultural awareness and sensitivity classes for all employees. That way they can help to learn the culture they're interacting with and be sensitive to that. And then lastly, to measure this, we would do questionnaires for the client, like maybe before and after the treatment, just to make sure that we're meeting their needs and being culturally sensitive to them. And another way we can measure this is to look at attrition and see what the reasons are people are leaving treatment. And if it has to do with cultural issues, then we could work to address that.
So, Laura, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about yourself. We really appreciate that. So now we're going to tell you a little bit about the agency here. You may already know this, but it's just something that we really want to emphasize. So Agency X serves predominantly low and moderate income individuals from the Vietnamese community here in Houston. We have strived to provide holistic services here at this location. So we either offer or refer our clients to education, health, housing, literacy, and basic needs services. For this social work position, it's been created because our agency has noticed a need. This need stemming from an intergenerational conflict that has become more pronounced amongst older, more traditional individuals from the Vietnamese community and younger individuals who are trying to assume a more American identity, whatever that means to them, a new identity. And so as the younger individuals are shunning more traditional cultural practices, conflict has occurred, and we've noticed that this conflict is impacting our ability to provide services and the utilization of these services that we offer. And as such, we'd like the social worker for this position to begin to address those things. And so just to get to know you a little bit more and to get to know your fit for this job, our coworker Jessie here is going to ask some questions.
Okay, so really interested in knowing what experiences you have with the Vietnamese community.
So I've worked with the Vietnamese community for the last 5 years. I worked at the Vietnamese Community Center, and then before that in undergrad, I studied abroad in Vietnam for 6 months.
Okay, so you were really immersed in the Vietnamese community. So on a scale of like 1 to 5, how comfortable or aware are you with that community?
I would say a 4. When I studied abroad, I was like completely immersed in the culture, and I lived with a Vietnamese family. We still keep in touch, and I'm still learning about the culture, and I'm hoping to get up to a 5 one day. But I don't know if that's like even possible.
Okay. So would you say you're fluent in the language?
I'm conversational, and I'm actually still working on learning Vietnamese. I have Rosetta Stone at home, and I am teaching myself more conversations and words and stuff like that.
Okay. So based on the services that our agency provides, are you aware of any biases that you have towards this population, or?
So I know you guys provide education, and I would say that I have noticed sometimes I have a bias against, because in my house education was always very emphasized, and so I noticed sometimes I have a bias against those who maybe dropped out of high school or don't strive to have higher education. But I'm working to address that with myself and realize that not all cultures emphasize higher education like my family did, and I don't know the context, I don't know the circumstances as to why someone might have dropped out of high school or something like that, so I'm working to address that bias.
Thank you very much for your time, and we will get back with you. Okay, so my concluding thought is that although cultural competency is the goal, it's not necessarily a destination that you'll ever arrive at, because it's more about a long-term process. Like, it's more about cultural humility than knowing everything about a specific culture.
And my concluding thought is that it's important to put the work in outside of your agency setting. And putting in work can mean different things. So it could mean doing flashcards so that you learn more of the language of the community you're serving. In our circumstance for Laura, with working with the Vietnamese community, it could be her doing Rosetta Stone at home to learn more of Vietnamese, and it could also be going home and reading up the history of the people, people or the history of the country of origin that these people are coming from. So with the Vietnamese community, it would be important to go home and do the work to understand the factors that happened with the Vietnamese War, both before and after, and the lasting effects on that community and the people that have immigrated to America.
My concluding thought is acculturation does not look the same for everybody, and one person's acculturation experience is not the same across the scope of everyone in different cultures, different people, and we need to be more aware of that.